Hello everyone and welcome to the in construction end of my tropical style UK garden project on a very beautiful Sunday afternoon. Yes, it's a bit breezy, but there's some blue sky up there. Not sure how well this little camera can capture it, but it's a fantastic day to be outside doing some gardening. And if you didn't see my last video, looking at my new fire pit plans, then I'll give you a quick tour around now. So heading down here, as you can obviously see, I haven't finished digging it out yet, but this will be my sunken seating area, bench all around the sides, and a sort of fire pit bowl in the middle, which we can remove, put sun lounges here. We really want to enjoy this space as much as possible through the summer, so that's the absolute goal. But for me, probably the best part of this area, it's the planting. You can probably see, just looking up here, I've already got a few palms in the ground, and these are my biggest palms that I've grown in pots for years. We've got a Jubutia hybrid palm there. Just look at the size of that one. It's a colossal thing. I'd say it's getting on now for maybe 800 mil, pushing a metre across right to the edges. Absolute beauty. There we've got the Vulcano. That is a Chamaerops or a Chamaerops, and it's a Vulcano variant, which basically means the whole thing is a lot tighter. The leaves are stiffer on shorter stems, very wind resistant and a very tough palm. In the middle, we've got the standard humilis there, the Mediterranean dwarf fan palm, and at that side, we've got a sorifera, which is basically a bluer form, really fantastic looking, and it'll absolutely thrive here. But today, I'm planting in that spot there. Now, one thing that I will say, a lot of these plants, they really need good drainage. And I'm lucky here, in that a lot of the soil that I've actually dug up, you can probably see here, it might look like clay, but it's actually really sandy. So as this dries out, because I did just water it in last night, that soil will provide great drainage. So as a result, the plants I'm putting in here, they won't need too much in terms of additional grit dug in. And what I can do is actually get away with some sand, some sharp sand instead. So that's exactly what I'll be doing today, putting in a plant that really needs good drainage, full sun, and it's a bit of a dangerous one. Not in terms of absolute toxicity, but look at this beast here. This is an agave and it's a ferox. It's an absolutely savage plant, this one. As you can probably see, it doesn't look the best at the minute. There's some cosmetic blemishes, and that's because agaves in general, I find them quite tricky to overwinter. Sure, I mean, if I pass all the weeds here, you can see my Agave montana. Those have been in the ground pretty much unprotected with just a covering on the very coldest nights, and they've come through with only some minor blemishes on the lower leaves, and those will get tougher as they get bigger, like the one further back there, just in front of the nettles that I haven't weeded yet. So those ones are very tough, but the next level of agaves, including plants like this Ferox, I've seen them growing down in the south of England without protection. They get absolutely huge just fine there. But here in North Lincolnshire, they're not guaranteed hardy, and really they want some kind of overhead cover to keep the moisture out, and they really want good drainage. So that's hopefully where this little island here, this raised bed, well, I say raised bed, this is a huge raised bed, basically a raised bed on a giant scale. This is where it's going to go. Firstly, great drainage. Second, it's going to have some really good sun here. And thirdly, I want this plant well out of the way. I don't want to be brushing past it, because if you look at the edge of these leaves here, just look at these spines. You probably see, looking further down, that I'm dressed like an absolute child playing in the garden today, but I guess really that's what I am. Just look at the size of some of those. You really don't want to get one of those in your finger. But going back to the damage, this is mainly because I had to keep this in my polytunnel. I don't really have somewhere with good overhead cover and good airflow. It had to go in the polytunnel, and as a result, the humidity was a bit high. So what I've decided is, I might as well plant this out. I'm going to take a chance here, give it the best spot in the garden for it, give it everything that I can to give it the best chance possible, and I think it'll be perfect just over there. So as well, I think as well as it being the right spot practically, I think it's going to look phenomenal. It really had a sort of alien-like bit of structure to the middle of that border, and this is one of the bigger plants I've got, so I want to get it in first. And where I'm thinking is pretty much right in here. Now, I've already taken it out of its pot because I had to actually carry it down to this end of the garden. So I do want to get it planted pretty quickly before all the roots completely dry out. If you look closer to the base of the plant, you can even see there a little pup circling round. I don't know if that'll find its way to the surface, but that's how agave like this propagate. And as well, how weeds like these propagate. Should really take those out. But it's an absolutely savage plant, this. I know it looks a bit rough at the minute, But if this does prove to be happy in that spot, if we do get some kind of winters, or I can give it some kind of overhead cover, these look completely monstrous as they size up, and it'll certainly hold its own against the other massive palms, the Vulcano, and over there the Jubutia. So let's get it in the ground. Like I said, I've already taken it out of its pot. That was a bowl-shaped pot, so it's got a fairly decent root ball. So what I need to do really is decide on the position of it, because believe me, this is an agave that I don't want to move more than once. So where I'm thinking is pretty much centrally in that spot there. Let's get my trusty spade. It's a bit battered now, but what I will do, I'll put a link to this spade in the description below. It is the best spade I've ever used, and if you're tall like me, I'm just over 6'3", then a tall spade like this is an absolute godsend, really helpful. So let's get a hole dug. Now obviously, because I've just piled this earth in, digging doesn't take a lot of effort. The best thing really that I need to make sure is that I've got the position of this right, because like I said, I don't want to move it again. So I'm thinking somewhere quite centrally there, and what I'm going to do is quite simply push a lot of this soil down this way, because that's where it needs to be anyway. Essentially this area, it's sort of like a rockery, but I don't like to use that word because people have already got a sort of preconception of what a rockery is. This is definitely going to be something a little bit different. All kinds of exciting arid style exotic plants, desert planting, really tough spiky plants. That's what it's all about. So I'm going to have some more small rocks up here, but I just want to get this in first and not make it hard for myself. So what I'm thinking is something like that for the central bowl. Like I said, if you have somewhere that's got more clay soil, then I would dig some extra grit in for drainage. But you can probably see here the type of soil that I'm digging out, that should be very well drained, particularly in winter. And that's a crucial thing with agaves, good drainage, and it's amazing just how cold tolerant they actually can be. So you can probably hear as I'm digging into there that there's a fairly decent amount of stones in it anyway. So that should be about perfect. The right mixture really of a good nutritional soil, bit of sand mixed in, nice drainage, and then having the whole area raised up, that really helps as well. One thing that I see a lot of people recommend, which I don't personally agree with, is digging lots of grit directly into the hole when you're planting. I'm a bigger fan of improving the soil on the whole area. So like here, I've gathered together all my plants that really need good drainage, full sun, good drainage especially in winter. And I've basically raised the whole area up, added a lot of good quality topsoil to it from further down the garden. I tend to do that rather than just improving one specific hole, because what can happen if you put a lot of grit into a hole, especially in very clay-based soil, is that in winter it can fill with water and you can actually create a sump. You can actually trap water around the roots, so we don't want to do that. You can see, looking at the agave then, why the name Ferox or Ferocious definitely suits this. It's an absolute beast. And I got it from my friend Mark, who, let's just say, he had a disagreement at home about being able to keep it because it's so spiky and vicious. Now, obviously, here in the garden, we're quite lucky to have a long garden, so that's why it's going to be at this far end of the garden, behind a gate. There's no chance of children or pets, hopefully, stumbling onto this, because that could cause some serious damage. But interestingly, Mark actually got this from someone who in turn sold it, because I think one of their elderly relatives actually fell in it and it drew blood. So this plant is not a known killer, but it's certainly been done for GBH in its time. And hopefully now, third time lucky, it's going to find a home there where it can't cause any further harm. But probably the most crucial part is actually lifting it, getting it over there. So I'm going to do this really carefully. Not just because I've got this camera on me, but because I quite like having two eyes and the 20/20 vision that they give me. I want to keep it that way. So I'm just going to lift this up really carefully. I won't lie to you, this is quite heavy, but certainly not as heavy as those big palms. You can probably see the leaves getting a little bit close to the camera now. And what I'm going to do, this is the crucial bit, is just get it over here. Get it somewhere close to the hole and quickly have a quick assessment. So I'm mostly happy with that. I'm going to build the soil level up to it, so we'll actually get it in the hole. Yes, I do grow plants that are highly toxic, like ricinus, and other plants which I suppose have the potential to be toxic, like sago palms, but this is definitely the most dangerous plant in terms of mechanical damage. Those spines, they're almost 3 inches long. As you can probably see from the state of my hands, it's already bitten me a few times today. Hopefully no more. So, let's now, ouch, it does bite. As you can see, I think I've actually underestimated just how big a hole I need for this. This is the problem with doing the talking in these videos, you can easily get carried away. But, to be honest, I quite like it raised up more. So, I suppose what I need to do is really check my final positioning. Because this is the plant, like I said, it can get it, well, it's going to get substantially larger than this. So I really need to leave the room around it. And ideally, not have these leaves pushing right into this little path, or what will be a path here. To a certain extent, it's going to happen a bit, but we want to get it right. There we go, it's actually settling a lot better now. So, to be fair, something like that's probably about right. Maybe just stood up a little bit further that way. So, I think somewhere there will be about right, to be honest. I'm happy with that. Yes, it is raised quite high at the minute, but I'm going to be backfilling around this whole area, so that's not the end of the world. I do want to get rid of a load more soil here, so I need to be able to bring the whole level up. I don't want this sunk too low down, because once you put a few plants in, you've then established a soil level. So I think that is about right. Yeah, let's go for it. So it's now time to fill in around it. And what I'll do is use some of this soil I've got here first. I'll fill in the back. Yeah, I think that looks really nice. In fact, I think the word nice is probably completely the wrong word to use. Depending on what your plant interests are, this plant is either horrific or completely awesome. Either way, the word nice shouldn't ever come into it. What I will be doing is, as a sort of finishing touch to this border, putting a load of rocks and small pebbles, and then a sort of we'll say some sort of grit covering, bit of sand as well, to really help keep the weeds down, to trap in as much heat as possible, and to also stop the water splashing up and reduce the humidity. But that needs to come at a later stage once I've done the little planting. So for now, we'll just get this dug around. You've probably got the impression in my recent garden plans video looking at this area that this is my favourite kind of gardening. It definitely is. There's something about cool plants like this, the more sort of physical aspects of planting, and also the creativity. It's not every day that you get to completely change how parts of your garden look. To me, I don't like decorating or interior design. I can appreciate it, I don't like it, but this is what I really enjoy. So you can hear that this soil is nice and gritty already. But one thing that I do have to keep reminding myself, we are in North Lincolnshire. We're sort of, well, we'll say just below halfway up the UK. Definitely more northern than southern in terms of climate. So it's easy to get carried away when you're planting and think, yes, we're in the Mediterranean, we can grow anything. The reality is that plants like this They are, we'll say, borderline at best, and you need to do everything you can to give them the best chance possible. And that starts off, and in fact, it's highly dependent on the way you plant it. Like everything, you might have heard the phrase, right plant, right place and all that, and it's a mantra that you should definitely garden by. You might think when it comes to exotics like this, that in theory come from the other side of the world, agaves from America, palms from the warmer parts of Europe, you might think that that's completely irrelevant, but it's all about recreating as close as you can the sort of conditions that these plants need to thrive, or at least survive. So, put some more of this sandy soil around it. I won't get too carried away yet. Bit of glass there, chuck that in my pile. This is all the stuff I've dug up. So, I think what I need to do now, get some more rocks in front of it. Now, this might be a little bit tricky, but what I've done is I've laid all my rocks out on the floor so I can choose the best fitting ones for the area that I've got. So, there's plenty of flat ones I'm going to save for the top, but I think this has got a nice bit of character to it. So what we'll do is maybe put that, just chuck that in like that, damage the root ball a bit. Do you know what? I think that will be about perfect there. Let's just stand back. I would generally recommend when you're doing any kind of planting, always position the plant in its pot first so you can get an idea of whether you like that spot. But with this one, I had to take it out of its pot. It was in a really heavy bowl, a ceramic bowl that I couldn't have carried all the way up the garden. Or I could, but it would have been slightly dangerous. But having said that, I'm pretty happy with that positioning. What I'll be doing with all these crevices, planting loads of succulents, some hardy bromeliads. I've got some other smaller agaves and things like that. So every spot in this border will be used. You could probably hear the wind just rustling through the palms. And to be honest, that's a sound that I absolutely love. Just sitting back. It's hard to describe a sound. It sounds completely different to leaves, but it's such a beautiful rustling sound. And hopefully when we're in this fire pit, those long warm summer evenings, that'll be a soundtrack to many a good time. So, I'm sort of happy with that. I'm using this stone more as a sort of structural stone to help keep a lot of the moisture in, or should I say moisture out and soil in. So I'm thinking something like that. So what I'll do then, I'll get the soil in. Now, to be honest, I have actually got a couple of bags of sharp sand or grit sand, which I will probably use here just to give a bit of extra drainage. As a general rule, sharp sand's not ideal for adding into the ground because it can actually help form clay. Grit's so much better. But like I said, if you're going to raise an area up anyway, this is already going to have fantastic drainage. Anything like this sand will really help to improve it. So we'll just pour that in. This isn't builder's sand, I should say. This is sharp sand. That's pretty crucial. Builder's sand that you use to make mortar with, it's not great for this. It can soon get a bit sloppy. It doesn't have the same drainage that grit sand does. So put that down there for now. So I think the crucial thing to remember with these kind of plants is exactly where they come from. That's a great care tip for a lot of exotics and something that I will look at in a future video. But if you know where a plant comes from, you can get a good idea about the kind of conditions that it likes. So agaves like this, they're not completely desert plants. They do need some water to survive, but equally, they do come from places with less rainfall than the UK, with soils that have got less nutrition in them. So the normal garden soil behind this will be plenty good enough. It'll give it enough moisture, enough nutrition. At the front here, all I need really is just for good drainage. Somewhere for all these waters to come through these seams to drain away from it, particularly in winter. So I think another bag of sand. You can either get sharp sand in huge bulk bags from builders merchants, I think at the minute you pay about £45–50 for a ton bag, or in these bags which are 25 kilos for, we'll say, just over £2 from your DIY big department stores. So I'm just going to pour loads of this in here. Probably a load of dogs in the background, but it's not Max, luckily. So we'll put that down there again, and then we'll just smooth this round. See, what did I tell you? Gardening, it basically is just playing outside. I'm not going to be building any sandcastles today, but a bit of playing with sand. It's very tactile. So at the minute, it's more about getting the levels, filling the gaps in. Nothing too precise or permanent. So I'm roughly happy with that. And the thing with this agave is, yes, it'll get huge, but it's not going to get really tall. So you'll still be able to see the palm, the Vulcano there behind it, no problem at all. So I guess really what I need to think about now is what I'm going to do for this spot here before I put any more soil in. So, interesting little planting pocket there. I might try to keep it exactly as that. So that's solid there. So I might try to keep this little bit here for another plant. Maybe a small euphorbia, something like that. Yeah, soil's pretty good there. So I guess what I need to do really is have another bag of sharp sand and fill that in. Sure I had a third bag. Yes, I did. You can probably hear one of the neighbours or someone in one of the gardens opposite cutting his grass. I do like being outside at this time of year, just enjoying the warmth of the sun, hearing people actually getting on with the gardens. It's a time full of sort of optimism and activity, especially after the long winter that we've just had. Not a cold winter necessarily, but definitely one that's felt like a long one. So I'm not using any cement to actually bed these in, but I am making sure that mechanically they're definitely very solid, because this is something that I don't want to move, and it will be fairly permanent. Well, when I say fairly, this is about as permanent as it'll get here. So I'm just going to pack some of that in. Now, a couple of things that I will say: if you live in an area with a lot of cats, then maybe using a lot of sand on your borders isn't the best idea. And to a certain extent, some people have mentioned this when I showed them my previous sort of desert island style area. Does it wash away? Well, the answer to that is, after the first few rainfalls, yes, it will tend to wash down a bit. But what you find is, with a bit of grit on top and some larger pebbles, it does settle down eventually, it does bed in. And as long as you top it up every couple of years, I would have thought, then the overall look is definitely one of an exotic desert style island. So I'm just going to pack this bit here, again full of more sharp sand. So this is the way that I'm trying to do it really, piece by piece. I don't want to create a sort of cliched rockery, but I want to give the impression it's more of a sort of cliff fall. And I also want to have these sort of exciting little pockets where I can really plant some unusual arid style succulents, all kinds of different exotics. Just get this side filled in around here. Being very mindful of those spines. So put that bag over there. So as you can see, even on a raised bed like this, or even in a raised bed, I'm still planting this at a bit of an angle to give it the best drainage possible. So that's loads of sharp sand chucked in. So now brush a bit off my hands. It's like being at the beach, this, isn't it? What I will do is get some more of this soil and use that to fill around it. You can hear village life in the background. All the sounds that I generally exclude from my normal garden videos, but I like to keep in these POV or point of view ones. So I'll probably disguise that front edge with a smaller rock if I've got one around. We'll see what I've got down here. Although, to be honest, I think most of these are a little bit too big. It's tricky. Let's have a quick look around here. See, I'm really looking for a rock that's like sort of that shape, like a sausage shape. Just go across the front of there. Although, to be fair, maybe it's this one literally staring me in the face. Let's go for this. So something like that, maybe. Let's look a bit further back. I know in Japan, placing rocks, it's a fine art. You spend hours, if not years, positioning every single one. Personally, I like to just sort of go with the flow a little bit more. Not rushing, but making sure I'm happy with each one and then getting on. So what I might actually do is just take a bit more of this sand out of here, just so I can sink it down. And this is something that I mentioned in my plans video for this area, that when you're positioning rocks, you always want to ideally have the edges of the rock hidden in the ground, and that way the whole thing just looks more naturally placed. And that's why I've currently got a trench dug out around these. It will be filled in so you can't see the bottom of these, but maybe something like that. So just going to get some of that sand, again just having a play. And how I work with the rocks is exactly the same as how I actually plant a border with plants. Starting off with the big ones first, positioning the ones that you need to get in at the back, like the Vulcano palm and these huge rocks here, and then gradually getting smaller until one day, maybe later in the summer, I'll be able to get some small rocks. To be fair, I might be able to do this area a bit quicker, get some small rocks and put the finishing details in. But I am relatively happy with that position in there. Again, you've got all these crevices here for some alpine plants, some interesting succulents, some sempervivums or sempervivums. So, just get a bit more of that sand around there. So I'm relatively happy with that. Obviously there's this whole area down here to get planted up. I've got some exciting plants there, but this morning I just wanted to get that one in, or should I say this afternoon now, just after lunch, and I think I'm happy with that. I like the stones there, and to me the whole sort of vibe I was going for here, well, I don't know if you've seen Paul Spracklin's garden. If you Google his garden, it's got some amazing exotics, and it's sort of like a tumble down sort of volcano side. Also, a little bit of St. Michael's Mount down in Cornwall. Some of those amazing gardens in Cornwall where they've got rocks tumbling down and all kinds of crazy succulents, agaves and other spiky plants growing out of them. That's a general feel that I wanted to create here. And that is, I think, what I've got. So, I'm relatively happy with that. Believe me, this isn't the finished result, but it's just another puzzle piece. And that's how I'm approaching this whole exciting border. Break it down one plant at a time. And if I can get each one right and make sure the whole thing flows as a general sort of border, then I'll be very, very happy. So I think I'll call it there for today's video. Thank you very much for watching the spiky beast, the most dangerous plant in my garden, the absolutely awesome Agave Ferox has now found its home, and hopefully it'll have a long, happy life here, getting really big, really bold, and be an absolute stunner when you look down the garden.